For those of you that were here last week, I will endeavor not to repeat myself. But we discussed last week briefly the structure of the entire Haggadah and some of those recurring numbers. 4 kosot, 4 she'elot, 4 banim, 4, and we talked already about the symbolism of 3 matzot, 3 avot, 4 imaot, and so on. For tonight, we were going to be talking about the Piyutim. The Haggadah, as I explained last time, was composed post-Churban Habayit. This is the ultimate composition designed for the Galut, in which instead of the Beit HaMikdash, the entire ceremony and the entire issue of Yetziat Mitzrayim comes into the home. Instead of the Mizbeach, we now have the table. Instead of the Kohanim, we have father and mother dressed as if they were Kohanim. And everything is surrounded around the family. And one of the greatnesses, of course, as Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch put it, is that the Yesod of Yiddishkeit was and became even more so the Mishpacha. That's where it opens up in the book of Shmot, where it counts, these are the sons of Yaakov, Ish u'mishpachto, Ish u'beito, Bau, they came with families, they remain as families. The strength of the family is what held them before, what held them during, and what held them afterwards. And it is for this reason that we indicated that the 2 simanim that Eliyahu Navi would be looking for was the 2 dam. And when it says b'damai chai, it was dam milah and dam korban pesach. Those were the 2 things. Without korban pesach, we have the seder. And at that time, we indicated that it was, in fact, the seder that, even more than Yom Kippur, is the last ritual the Jews leave. So no matter how far they are, kosher or not kosher, they have a seder almost regularly. The Haggadah, people talk about the Baal Haggadah as if we know who this author was and put it together. It is one of the great mysteries and wonders of Yiddishkeit is that our liturgy sometimes is formed grassroots-wise, and it is taken on and accepted in various kehilot and becomes widespread. And so there's lots of piyutim, lots of religious poetry that was composed both for the Seder and those that were not composed for the Seder at all, as you will soon see, but were put into later on the Haggadah and were accepted and became the favorite parts of the Haggadah. In that favorite part became the notion of Shirah. Shirah as both poetics and a song. And every family with their favorite songs that they sang throughout the ages, carried from generation to generation. And in a sense, recollecting the fact that as we came out of Mitzrayim, our greatest magnum opus was nothing more than Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Israel, when we finally sang, when we found our voices to be able to sing to God. The Haggadot of certain kehilot have a different order. So I found out that it isn't always exactly as we know it. We know, of course, all of these, Kadesh, Urchatz, Yachatz, etc., all that part. You come to the very, very end, after you've drunk the 4th kos, after Eliyahu Navi has been invited into your home, after we've spelled out Shfoch Chamoscha Al Hagoyim, when we demanded of God to leash out all of his rage against those who don't know him, comes Niltza. And here is where we begin to sing big time. We've already done Hallel. We've sung all of those songs, and now we have all of this collection of songs. Now, the ones, of course, that we usually sing, right, as we finish the 4th kos, is Chasal Sidur Pesach. And there's traditional songs, there's more modern songs, there's all kinds of songs that have been, melodies, I should say, that were written for this. Chasal Sidur Pesach came into the Haggadah in the 11th century and was composed by Rabbi Yosef Tov Alem from Tzolfat, clearly written for the Haggadah, and became universally accepted. It is followed usually by the oldest piyut that we have. And that oldest piyut is the one that I have in front of you. Uvechen vayhi b'chatzi halayla. It was written by Yanai, and it comes from the 5th century. And it is deemed by many to be extremely holy, but it in fact was not written for the Haggadah at all. It is in fact the 7th section of very long krovot, which we call yotzres, for Shabbat Hagadol. And this last part, rather a long last part, became accepted almost throughout and has a great many commentaries written on it. We will deal with this one, and then we'll go further. It is followed usually by something called Ometz Gvurotecha, which is otherwise also known as, Zevach Pesach, which was written by a Reb Eliezer HaKalil, the most famous and the most prolific of all of the Paitanim, and that was written in the 6th century, and also widely accepted. We then have Adir Bimlucha, which my family loves. Lecha ulecha, lecha ki lecha, lecha af lecha, right? All of that, everybody knows all of that. Anonymous. We don't know who wrote it. We don't know who wrote it, but we find it already printed in the 13th century. Ditto for Dayenu. Dayenu, and who doesn't know Dayenu? 11th, 12th century, early Middle Ages, anonymous. And then the last one, which was supposed to have been among the last ones, Echad mi yodea, who knows one? We know one, right? Supposedly these children's songs, Kilu, 15th century, no author. No author. And the last one, Haggadah. So we're going to do what they used to call in Hershele Estropola, when he was very, very poor, and they asked him to bring a fish. He brought the head and he brought the tail, and he says, if I have the head and the tail, I got a whole fish. So this is the whole fish. We've got the head, we've got the tail, the first and the beginning of it. It was first found printed in the Haggadah of the Maharal in 1590. But interestingly, it is attributed to the author that wrote Halachma'anya. And the Maharal argued that because this is an Aramaic and that is an Aramaic, that in fact it comes from the time of literally right after the Churban of Beit Sheni, and would have therefore been the oldest of the Piyutim, but was accepted only later on. Now, some of the moderns see similar kinds of songs of this kind in other folk literature, and they claim that this was maybe copied off of German folk songs. But of course, a lot of Jews always like to believe that everything we have we copied from somebody else, instead of thinking that maybe they copied it off of us. The Chidah heard a comment made because Sfardim did not necessarily accept Haggadah in their Haggadot, and you will find that some Haggadot don't have it. He heard somebody making fun of it, and he said that that person should be ostracized, because he says this has great deep meaning. He says whether or not in other words, whether or not the Sfardim had accepted it as part of what they would do in their Seder, this was something that he deemed extremely important. We will deal with that as well. What combines so much in the Haggadah together, if there is any kind of, if you like, a chut ashani, a scarlet thread that ties it all together, is the theme of night, Laila. Now, it begins and mimics something that occurs in Sefer Shmot. We hear that Paro got up when chasing for Moshe Rabbeinu on the night that there was Makat HaPchorot and the firstborns were dying, and it says that Paro got up Laila. It doesn't say Balayla, It says just night. What does night represent for us? And why is it so important? Because you're going to be asking, Manishtana halayla hazeh. And you're going to keep hearing about Laila, Laila, Laila throughout all of this. In Kabbalistic thought, Laila always represents Golus. But Golus doesn't just mean exile or diaspora or being away from Eretz Israel. It means darkness when there is no clarity between right and wrong. It indicates a time in which there is no differentiation between the innocent and the guilty. When good people suffer, righteous people seem to be ignored, evil seems to be flourishing. But it also represents sometimes a complete loss of faith. In other cases, it indicates tremendous terror, particularly terror that cannot be seen, terror from the unknown that's going to come and strike you when you least expect it. It indicates the lack of anything, what we think of as outer space, the absence. It indicates nightmares and terrors. At the same time, Harav Lehman points out, night is the time when we fall asleep and we have a chance to heal from all of the wounds of the day. It indicates rest. It indicates the beauty of the nights and the starlight. It indicates pleasure and sweet dreams and forgetting all of the pain and sorrow and questions that we have. And it has that double meaning throughout. But what is the common denominator between both the good and the bad of night is that night always represents our complete vulnerability and helplessness. When we can actually do nothing, not to bring about the good or to take away the bad. It is the helplessness of sleep. You cannot will yourself to have good dreams, and you cannot will yourself not to have the nightmare. And yet that theme of night becomes the number one thing, uvechen vayhi b'chatzi halayla. It occurred in the middle of the night. The middle of the night, if the night was divided into 4 watches, would have been smack dab in the middle. It doesn't mean 12 o'clock. It means from darkness till dawn, divided in 4s, and there used to be watches, right? Watchmen, nashmoret, and they would exchange themselves. That's what happens at that time. It is at that deepest, darkest part of night, the stars shine most brightly, the moon glows most beautifully, and we are at our most helpless position. And it is dafka then that the Ribono Shel Olam chose to show his strength and that he's in control in pivotal moments of our history. This is a crucial thing that occurs. But there's something else that occurs in the middle of the night. In Tehillim Kuf Yutet, in the 119th Psalm, David HaMelech tells us, Chatzot Laila akum lehodot lach. In the middle of the night, I get up to thank you. Al mishpatei tzidkecha, on your righteous judgments. Chazal tell us as follows, that there was a harp hanging over his bed. And in the middle of the night, a breeze would come by from the north and would strum on that harp, and it would awaken him. And David HaMelech would then awaken to that music that came out of his harp and learn until the dawn would rise. Of course, it was also under those circumstances that a bird sang in the middle of the night, the nightingale, and distracted him from learning at that moment. And it was then that the Malach HaMovis could come and take his soul. The good and the bad occurring both in the middle of the night. Now let's get a sense about why the middle of the night is so crucial for us. Our forefathers and foremothers, if you like, okay, in Egypt, were all girded, dressed and ready to go, eating the Korban Pesach in a big rush as they were doing so, and waiting with the doors shut. Outside, there are screams and terrors because the firstborn are dying, and they are hovering there, not knowing what might happen at that last moment. They're waiting for that, and they've been told that come dawn, they're leaving Egypt. But they're terrified. So this sense of anticipation of a new day coming, a liberation that's standing at the door, and the terror at the same time of whatever death is going on outside is all combined together. All this comes together. And this is what we're reading here. Now, what we have here is, and I did put down translations for you because otherwise our analysis would be taking a few days, not an hour or two, in which the poet here brings some crucial events based on what's written in the Tanakh that occurred balayla. That's what happened in the night, these things that occurred in the night. It has been pointed out that this was not an accident about why it would occur at night. Chazal tell us that it was in the middle of the night, dafka when human beings are most vulnerable, that the Rabbanu Shalom can show his power on the one hand and at the same time show his infinite unconditional love. And that's the time, by the way, when we do tikkun chatzot, and you have people crying for the Churban Beit HaMikdash in the middle of the night, because supposedly at that time there is a special ear open to hear one's pleas, those that are crying in the middle of the night. What occurs here is as follows. Az rov nisim hifleta balayla. He says most miracles had occurred dafka at night. That's the way you did it. Berosh ashmurot ze halayla. At the head, in other words, at the very top, if you think of it as an ark, at the top of the ark of that night, on this very night. Some of the Mefolshim point out that the word ze, and you'll hear a lot of ze, halayla hazeh, right? Ze in Gematria is equivalent to 12, for the 12 Shvatim. Ger tzedek nitzachto kenechlak lo halayla. Now there were some who disagreed. Ibn Ezra wrote very firmly, not against Yanai as much as against Khalil, in this style of Piyutim, which he didn't particularly like. He saw it as being riddles, and he felt that people didn't know it. Yet oddly enough, we knew only until the Cairo Geniza was found, we didn't know that Yanai had actually written a whole bevy of Piyutim, some of whom we were actually incorporated in our tefillot, including some that you might know from Yom Kippur. V'chol maminim was written there. When did we find this? In the Cairo Geniza, they found all of these handwritten and signed there by none other than Yanai. So we knew this. Yanai was not writing this to be a riddle, make it difficult for you to understand. He was presuming that when he wrote this, he was writing to a literate audience for whom the Tanakh was understood. And they would pick up on all of the allusions. Who is the Ger Tzedek? Who is the first Ger Tzedek, the first true convert? None other than Avraham Avinu. And he's using him, he says, it's at that time that you allowed him this incredible nitzachon, this great victory, when the night was split. Now, what he's actually referring to is when Avraham Avinu ran with the 4 kings against the 5 kings, and actually he didn't want to get mixed into their fights at all. But his nephew Lot was taken captive, and he had to go and liberate him. And though he did not want part in this war, he had to take part in what he was doing, and he won that. And we're told that by middle of the night is when the tide turned, and he won the great battle and brought Lot back. Others argue that there's a reason why we're making this particular nitzachon to be here at night. When we were little, we all read the midrashim about how it is that Avraham Avinu became a Gel Tzedek. He lived in a country that worshipped the sun, in Ur Kasdim. His father was none other than the great idol maker. And it was Avraham Avinu who, simply looking up at the sky and wondering who made this and who made that, and then who made them, you understand? Looked beyond this. So we see him looking up at the sky. But remember, it was him, he was the one that was called out to come outside and look up at the sky, and so will be your children like the stars. So it's appropriate that when we're imaging somebody who's not only a Gel Tzedek, but to indicate the association of night, it is not merely the night in which he won a battle, but it was in the night in which he was actually seeing. Now, remember, he also had Chazon Balayla, an image, a dream that came at night. It was Brit Ben Haptarim that occurred there. And there he saw all of Jewish history. And he saw the burning of those corpses that were laying there. And he sees the furnace, the meaning of which didn't make sense until the 20th century, with smoke that went up. And it told us that a deep, dark fear fell on him. And it was then that he was told that his children would be exiled, strangers in a strange land, where they would become enslaved, where they would be tortured, but where they ultimately would come out, benitzachon uberechush gadol. That's why this Gel Tzedek is appropriate for the night, because there's a lot of events that occur in his life that are pivotal, that occurred dafka at night. And all that was Vayhi b'chatzi halayla. Danta melech Grar b'chalom halayla. You judge that king of Grar. That's none other than Avimelech, who had taken Sarah, if you remember, right? And had he not lied that she was his sister, he would have killed, because God forbid, you see, they believed in property rights. So a woman belongs to her man, and we don't steal. So, but we can kill him, you understand, and take her. So in order to avoid that, they went, and of course you all remember that that was the night in which he would have had his way with her, except that God intervened. You judged him, balayla, in a dream, balayla. Now, what was the rest of the story there? Well, we know the rest of the story, right? Eventually they leave there, and then Sarah has a child, and of course it didn't end there, because Leitzanei Hador, the mockers could say that Sarah, isn't it interesting, spent one night in the palace of Avimelech. Next thing you know, she's pregnant, yeah. Hifradeta Arami be'emesh laila. You terrified the Arami, that's Lavan ha'Arami. And there's a play here on the word Arami, Ramai, the one that cheated Yaakov, gave him Leah instead of Rachel, kept on changing the terms of their agreement. And then finally, when he went chasing, when they finally decided to go home, he went chasing after them with full intention to kill Yaakov, because he said, after all, Habanot bnotai, habanim banai, the sons are mine, the daughters are mine. I would have had my way with you if God had not stopped me. Hashem told him not to do it. He terrified him enough that he didn't kill him, and Yaakov and his wives and children could make it to Eretz Israel. But on the way, V'Yisrael yasar lakel, vayuchal lo laila. And Israel, at that time, struggled, wrestled with God or with an angel, and prevailed that night. That's when he changed from Yaakov to become Israel. and became an image about how a Jew becomes Israel. You've got to wrestle with the angels. It's not simple. Life is not going to be a simple life, and by the time you're finished, you might prevail, but you're going to come out of it limping. There'll be costs to pay. And the Ramban says that all of this is Maaseh Avot, Siman Lebanim. This is all an archetype about what would occur to their descendants throughout the generations, that to remain Jews would mean that they would need to wrestle with the angel of Esav, with the forces that be, and with God himself when it seems that life makes no sense and is so horribly unfair. Vayhi b'chatzi halayla. Zera b'chorei Patros machatzta b'chatzi halayla. The children of Patros, which is one of the names of Mitzrayim. When you killed the children, the firstborn, you crushed them in the middle of the night. Chelam lo matz'u bekumam balayla. And when they got up at night, they could not find their chelam. Chelam can mean their money. Chayal can mean their soldiers. They ran scared, and there was nobody there to fight back. They lost their power because the firstborns, and not only the firstborn, but the mighty, the powerful people, the leaders were gone. Hence the chelam lo matzu, they did not find them as they woke up that night. And that event occurred again. Tisat negid charoshet silita bekochvei laila. Tisa, as in modern language, means the flight of the prince of Charoshet. That's none other than Sisra, who led scores and scores of thousands of men against Barak, who was inspired by none other than Dvorah. And that night we're told that they were smitten by Kochvei Laila, apparently a meteor shower. But we also know that there was a terrific thunderstorm that turned the entire pathways into mud. Now he finally fled for his life, and what's the rest of the story? And this powerful military leader found his death in the arms of Yael, who took the tent, what's it called, a yated, a peg, into his head. That's the rest of the story. So great events occurring at night. And of course, his death occurred at night by none other than a woman. Vayhi b'chatzi halayla. Ya'atz mecharef lenofef, ivui hovashta b'korav balayla. Little bit difficult. Sancheriv had anywhere from 180 to 250,000 men besieging Yerushalayim. He sent out his officer who spoke in Aramaic and screamed out to supposedly the king, Chizkiyahu, but also to the people, urging them, if they know what's good for them, to submit, to surrender. And Yeshayahu urges him not to give in at all. That night was Pesach. And he hears them singing Hallel. Inside Yerushalayim, they were singing Hallel as they brought the Korban Pesach. And his officers tell him, you don't stand a chance, but of course, Sancheriv demanded that they move forward with their attack. And that night, a plague breaks out, and they start dying. And the soldiers start fleeing in panic, probably bubonic plague. We're told that the corpses were laying all the way across as they ran and were fleeing and dying as they were going along. And the worst was averted. There were death corpses, carcasses laying across, thinking it took months before they could finally bury them all. That occurred in Eretz Yisrael. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, kara bal umatzavo bi'ishon laila. Bel is the Babylonian god, and the one that set him up. Both fell in the middle of the night as he tried to force Daniel and his cohorts and the Jews to worship him. Leish Chamudot, the beloved man, that is none other, that's the title given to Daniel, who was taken, by the way, with Nebuchadnezzar to be raised as a Babylonian, but who had the incredible wisdom to be able to interpret dreams. Nigla raz chazot laila. He had the revelation to interpret the raz, the sod, the secret of visions of the night. You will have heard, right, the writing on the wall that he read, and he could explain to them what would happen. Vayhi b'chatzi alayla. Flip the page. Mishtaker b'klei kodesh neherag bo balayla. That was Belshazzar, who was then murdered by Darius as he brazenly took the loot from Yerushalayim after Churban Bayit Rishon and used the vessels that were used for the korbanot and drank from them. He was killed by his own son that night. Nosha mibor arayot, and then, as vengeance against him, Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. He was saved from the lion's dens. Poter ba'atutei laila, the one that could interpret the nightmares. Be'atutim are the terrors of the night. Sin'a natar Agagi. Agagi is Haman. He kept this hidden hatred inside him and wrote the edicts, the books for their destruction by night. Vayhi b'chatzi halayla. But orarta nitzchacha alav, you awakened the victory over him, over Haman, when Achashverosh could not sleep that night. You remember when Esther managed to arouse his jealousy and kept him up at night, and then he wondered what had he done, right? They brought the books out, and he found out that he had never repaid, never showed any honor to Mordechai. And of course, Haman, who had been plotting to hang Mordechai, instead ended up having to carry the horse and scream in the streets, Kacha ya'aseh la'ish, right? With Mordechai decked out in royal garb. But now the future. Pura tidroch leshomer ma milayla. This is the source for the battle hymn of the Republic. You know about my Lord trampling in his vineyard. You all know that song, right? Because the Navi describes that in the end of time, God's vengeance would be as if he were crushing grapes in a vineyard. We're not talking about grapes, we're talking about people's lives. You understand? Pura tidroch, you will crush the fruit. For the watchman that says, Ma milayla. This shomer is the Jew that watches over his other Jews and asks the Ribbono Shel Olam, how long? For what? When will the night finally end? Well, when he asks this question, Sarach kashomer, God screams back just like the watchman screamed and said, Vesach, ata boker morning is coming, and also night. Why night? I want the night to end. No, morning is coming and also night, because both morning and night will become apparent that God is in control. Why do so many events happen, not only at night, but many of the Mefarshim argue that many of these events actually happened on the 15th day of Nisan. On this particular night. It's been pointed out beautifully that many of our enemies chose propitious days written in the Bible for doing the worst. It was not at all an accident that Bayit Rishon and Bayit Sheni and Beitar all fell on the 9th of Av. It is not at all an accident. Eichmann himself said that he chose propitious days for certain actions. So the Kinderaktion in the ghetto lodge, when they collected all the children and sent them to the gas chambers, was Dafka on Rosh Hashanah. He knew the concept of Kivakarat Dro, as God would count. They always chose these incredible days, and they knew what they were doing. It was written that Tinius Rufus, who was the consul, the third consul in Palestine under the Romans, he is the one that sentenced Rabbi Akiva to death, to the horrific death that he was put under. He is also the one that argued. He's called by Chazal Turnus Rufus. He studied the Bible well, and he chose to do whatever he did, dafka, on the important days that are important days to us. So he chose Tisha B'Av for the destruction of Beitar. He chose major holidays to create terrible pogroms. Those were chosen by us, but they weren't the only ones. Now, our history was such, and again, we not knowing exactly, we know, of course, this was written in the 5th century, so this is way before any of the things that we would have seen in Europe, you understand? But it is not at all a coincidence that, of course, so many events always occurred around Pesach. The great pogroms, the blood libels, one after the other. The association, of course, with Easter, the association with the claim that we were Christ killers, the claim, of course, that we used Christian children or Christian blood. And it didn't take only Christian blood. In certain Muslim countries, there were also blood libels. They were not going to be outdone by us. It worked that way for all. Now comes this last part, and it is the favorite part. At least in my family it is. Karev Yom, a day is coming, it's close. Asher hu lo yom velo laila. It is a day which is neither day nor night. It is a day in which there is no differentiation between dark and light. And we're told that that is the way it is described when Yemot HaMashiach will come. Ram, the one on high. Hoda, please let be known. Ki lecha hayom, af lecha halayla. That yours is the day, but that you're also in control in the nights when it seems like there is no God. You see, there wasn't an accident why Elie Wiesel chose to call his book Night. Shomrim hafked, appoint watchmen over your city. See, this is being written by people whose city has been destroyed, who are not allowed to enter the city. Kol hayom v'chol halayla. Appoint watchmen to watch over Yerushalayim and keep it safe all the days, meaning when the Shekhinah is here, when it's apparent that we have sovereignty, and also even when we're not there, even when we're outside of our country, even when we're not entering Yerushalayim through the nights. And finally, God, Ta'ir ke'or yom, light up like the light of day, the darkness of the night. In other words, let us see that you're in control. Let us see what our forefathers saw at Har Sinai. Reveal yourself to us. Vayhi b'chatzi halayla. And it is in the middle of the night. So this was clearly being sung in Golus and clearly reaching, but indicating something incredible, that even when it seems like we don't have our own sovereignty, and even when it seems like evil is flourishing, somebody's in control. And somebody put it very well, Rabbi Safran wrote it very well. He says it's called the Seder because yesh seder. There is an order. There is a purpose. It's not chaos. It may look like it sometimes, but as Rabbi Soloveitchik put it, he says, we're looking at life from the other side of the rug, where there's knots. We can't see the pattern. What he wants us to see is the pattern, that there is a pattern that leads to something, which is what leads us to the last. Remember, we said the head, now we've got the tail. Haggadah. Doesn't need a lot of interpretation. And in this one, there is no mystery at all, is there? And it seems like a children's story. Haggadah, Haggadah. Well, let's look at how this is usually interpreted. I'm going to, by the way, there are, I stopped counting, how many different pirushim. Just countless. But I will share with you at least some of the major ones. Among the major pirushim, with small variations as to who's the cat and who's the dog and who's the stick and so on, is that this Haggadah, this little tzigale, this little tiny goat, is Am Yisrael, who is, of course, the little tiny goat or kid, or as Chazal say, the keves among the 70 wolves, which was bought or acquired by God for 2 zuzim, which are none other than Shnei Luchot Habrit. And the kelev and the chatul and the cat and the dog and the stick and so on are nothing more than different nations that persecuted us, that overruled us, that enslaved us, each one in his own turn, until finally it'll all come to an end when the Rabboni Shalom will come along and set things straight. The second approach is that this is an argument between the Jew and the Egyptian. The Egyptians worshipped, among other things, Aries, but also the goat. The various horoscope signs. When the goat was consumed by a cat, no less, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the Egyptology in the pictures, you'll see that they actually worship the cat as well. They figured, oh, he's stronger than the goat. We'll worship the cat. When the cat is beaten by the dog, they worship the dog. When the dog is eaten by the stick, we go to the stick. When the stick is consumed by the fire, well, now you can worship the fire, right? But the water comes along and quenches the fire. You can worship water. Comes along the ox and drinks up the water, and we can worship the cow. Comes along the shoichet and slaughters the ox, and we worship him. Comes the malach hamoves and kills the shoichet, and we worship death. And finally, Egyptian is pushed against the wall. There's somebody stronger than even the angel of death, and that is our God. And that is the one that can kill the malach hamoves, you see? And so this was an argument about idolatry and who's stronger. My daddy is stronger than your daddy, and then we keep on going until we finally reach the penultimate one and comes to the ultimate power, the Rabboni Shalom himself. The Chassam Sofer noted, well, that we began the Seder with Halach Ma'anya in Aramaic. We end it with Aramaic. Both of them, he says, are not children's song. They're horrible lamentations. This is the bread of affliction, and this, he says, is no children's song. This is a horrible kinah. In both cases, we mourn the endless destruction, the endless power struggle of the big consuming the little, and nobody learning, and it doesn't seem to come to the end. And ultimately, we cry for Haggadah, Haggadah. It's not one, it's two. One for Korban Pesach and one for Korban Chagiga. And we bemoan the fact that we don't have either one of them. Ein lanu, not this Korban, not this Korban, which Dad once upon a time would have bought for 2 zuzim. That's right. He says, now we have none of this. All we can do is pray, and that's what we actually say in the Haggadah, that we ask the Rebbeinu Shalom that may we be happy again, bevinyan irecha, v'nochal sham min hazvochim, u'min hapsochim. You can again, we'll be able to eat from those sacrifices back in our homeland. And please bring an end to this senseless, stupid destruction. That's all. The Gaon of Vilna gives us an incredible interpretation. He says those 2 goats are the 2 little kids that Rivka prepared so that Yaakov could present them to his father when he pretended to be Esau. That's how he got the rights of the firstborn and the bracha. Do you remember? And then what happened? What did that unleash? Hatred and jealousy and the rest of our history. Comes along and we've got the cat, which represents Kin'ah, the dog, which represents Paro, the stick, which represents the staff of Moshe Rabbeinu, the ox, which represents the kingdom of Edom, Rome, the shoichet, the slaughter is none other than Moshiach ben Yosef, who will have a tremendous war against Gog Magog, who will then be killed by Malach HaMoves until Moshiach comes, and who will reveal himself at that point, none other but than the Rebbeinu Shalom himself. And he goes to great length to explain how each of these things are, but we don't have hands. The Imre Emes, the grandfather of the current Gerer Rebbe, who had seen so much of his family destroyed during the Shoah, who escaped barely with some of his children. They drew lots as to who would make it and who would not, who suffered horribly and mourned terribly until he died in 1948 with the rise of the State of Israel during the Pagazim. Said as follows: if you look at Jewish history backwards, or even currently, it will look like everything is chaos and happenstance, as if it makes no sense. But Haggadah affirms for us that there is a Seder and there's somebody watching. And it's not all chaos. It all is coming to an end. It's all going towards a purpose. It is not an accident at all. And that's what this Seder is all about. It is the ultimate affirmation that our history is not blind forces. Our history is our prevailing against stupidity and jealousy, against bloodlust, knowing that ultimately, Yavo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Osa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'shochat L'malach HaMoves, right? And that And that's when we can finally say not only L'Shana Ba'a B'Yerushalayim, but L'Shana Ba'a B'Yerushalayim Habnuya. Thank you very much. Any comments, questions? Okay. So now you don't have to give all the gore to your children. Let them sing and enjoy it as it is. But you can see the rest of it.